I'm Jason Dickson. My wife Vanessa and I, we run Brown and Dickson Booksellers on Richmond Row, the little hole-in-the-wall bookshop, which is really tiny. It's stuck between two buildings, like the Order of the Phoenix. Actually, recently I was in my bookshop, and I received the greatest compliment. Somebody walked by the front of my store and said to their friends, "Oh, this is one of those great hole-in-the-wall bookstores." And my heart couldn't be prouder. I knew I had achieved a goal in my life. Josh asked me to moderate this panel, and I was very pleased to do that because writing in London, Ontario is a fascination of mine and Vanessa's, and these are three great folks, and I'm really excited to talk about them today. I'm going to let them introduce themselves because I won't do justice to their accomplishments and personalities, but first, just before we get to them, sorry guys, one more second. I want to thank you for coming out on Saturday morning. I have children, so I was up at 6:30, and of course I have no choice in the matter. But if you're one of the blessed who do not have children, you did crawl out of bed to get here and chose not to sleep in. And I just want you to know we all appreciate it. You have kids, don't you, Aaron? You have? No, you don't? Oh, okay, all right, well, forget it. Forget it. Thank you so much for coming. We really do appreciate it. But yeah, so on to the event. So Aaron, why don't you tell us about yourself?
Yeah, no, I don't have kids, but I was up at like 6 o'clock this morning because I'm an awful contrarian. But thank you for coming out. I know that for most people, this is super, super early.
It is early.
I do several things. I teach at Western in the Department of English and Writing Studies. I am one of the founders of an online literary journal called the Thames Review, and also of the associated, just very new, small chapbook press called 845 Press, which I'm now going to promote because I'm more comfortable promoting other people's writing than my own. Will actually be, once this is done, we're going to scurry upstairs and set our table up in the book fair, and we've got 3 wonderful chapbooks by some really great writers, one of whom was London-based, Andy Verboom, so you should come and look at them. They're beautiful, and I'm really proud of them and the opportunity to put them out. I also do my own writing, and I have a novella coming out, forthcoming with Quattro Books. They're a little delayed, so you can pre-order it on Amazon, but I'm not sure when it will arrive. So that's me.
Hello. Whoa. My name is Camille Intson. I am the student writer in residence at Western University. I also do not have kids. What I do, I am primarily a playwright, so a lot of my plays have been produced in both amateur and professional capacities across the country, which is pretty cool. I'm also a poet. I do short fiction, and I am a folk singer-songwriter. I've got an album coming out early next year. What else do I do? I'm a student, and I'm a current artist in residence at the TAP Center for Creativity.
Hello, I'm David White. I do have a kid, and she was never a morning person, so I was really happy about that.
That's wonderful. That is wonderful.
A gift from God. And my first book is basically about my daughter, Shen, and our experience over 20 years, written over a period of 20 years. It's called The Lark Ascending, and it was published by Peddler Press. My second book is also published by Peddler Press, and it's coming out sometime in 2019, but 2019. But I have no idea when, so I haven't been informed about that stuff. And I teach at Fanshawe College, usually.
So one thing that interests, so thank you and welcome. One thing that does interest me about, all 3 of you have one thing in common. You all live in London, Ontario. I'm right about that, am I right? Yeah. So on my walk over here, I was I was thinking about, what is the theme of this talk? There's 2 things. Are we talking about it's London writing today? Am I right? Yeah. So are we talking about things that people are writing in London, Ontario today, which could be anything, just anything people happen to be writing who live in London, Ontario today? Or are we talking about things about London, Ontario that people write in London, Ontario today? Or should we talk, I guess it's 3 things, or should we talk about why London, Ontario today? Why, out of all the cities in the world, out of all the potentially better cities in the world, London, Ontario? And not that there are worse cities, of course. I've been to them. I'm sure you have too. There's 5. So let's start with the first question, because I think perhaps each of you have written about London, Ontario. I know, David, you have your new book with Peddler Press touches on London, Ontario. It deals with London, Ontario, I'm sure. Would you mind talking about that?
Well, actually, both of the books are centered in London, Ontario, because that's right. And the new book is. I have to explain that from 1968 until 1989, my parents had a house trailer at Ipperwash Beach. And that's where I spent my adolescence. I worked summers at the army camp. And then we had the crisis, the Ipperwash crisis, and the murder of Dudley George and that. And I thought, I'm never going to write about this. I'm never going to write about this. But then Laurie Graham published Settler Education, which is a phenomenal book. And all of a sudden, I started thinking about how I could write about it. How could I approach what is essentially an Indigenous subject when you get into it? So I started just exploring my own past and my experience, my adolescence, and just walking along that beach of Ipperwash between Kettle Point and Port Franks, actually, and so that's part of what the new book is about. At least the first half of it is about that, and so I say it's about London and the environs, and I think of everything, pretty much everything that's written about in the book is within an hour's drive of London. So I guess that sort of makes London the center of my universe. So, which it is actually, and when I think of it, we just moved, and I now live in this apartment building where I look out and I can see downtown London, Ontario. Yesterday, the plume of water at the forks of the Thames was going, and I could see that from my apartment. And yet, I live just a few blocks from the house that my great-grandparents moved into when they immigrated from England. So I guess that means I was a tree in a previous life. I just sort of am here, and I'm not moving anywhere. So.
That's interesting. I was recently watching Comedians in Cars Getting Coffee with the Jerry Seinfeld show, which is great. It's great if you guys haven't seen it. And Seinfeld's talking to one of his guests, and I forget which one it was, but she was from some other place in America, some small town. And I remember him saying, "Nobody cares where you're from." I remember him saying that to her. She was telling her story, and he was like, "Nobody cares where you're from." I remember it stuck with me because I remember feeling like I care where I'm from. Like when I'm elsewhere, I always tell people about where I'm from. And I was like, wait, like, am I wasting my time? Like, does nobody care where I'm from? But I care where I'm from. I write about where I'm from. And how do I justify doing that? Like, how do we make people care about places that they don't live in? Or, how do you, what's my question? How do you sort of translate that into your book?
I used to teach creative writing, and I used to, the thing is, God is in the details, right? You always tell me the details are important. They really are. I mean, they're really crucial, because I'd have a student would submit a poem that said, "I love you more than anyone has loved anyone in the history of the world." Okay. And then I'd get another one that said, "I love you like nobody's ever loved anybody in the history of the world." And I ended up with like 20 of those. And there were no details, right? So there's something about the details that make it, Burns right, "My love is like a red, red rose." Okay, now we're going somewhere, right? There's something there that my mind can hold on to. And I think the details, London is they're my details. It's from London, Ontario. And that's the specific, that's how I make it live. If I tried to write about some other place that I've, well, I did, because there's a section in the Lark Ascending with, I should explain I found myself as a gay man becoming the daughter of a child who was adopted from China. Unexpectedly, I found myself doing that and was not. And at one point, her mother and I were friends, obviously, although not in any sort of intimate detail. We went back to China with her. So there's a section of the book, The Lark Ascending, which is about China and Chinese places and sites. So as we were going there, and I was writing the poems as I was, being a tourist and taking my daughter back to the country that she was born in, including, we took her to her home city, or her city of origin, and back to the orphanage that she spent the first year of her life in. So I think London, and caring about your place, it just gives you details that makes your writing live. I mean, I don't write about London for the sake of writing about London. I write about London because I live here, and it's what I know. And my writing, I think, is stronger, more specific. And I think that's the key to really good writing, is that there's something specific about it, and often I read a book and I go, damn, how did they come up with that idea? That's like really good, and that sort of thing. But it's from that being in the place and writing about it, I guess.
That's fantastic. Now, I remember you when we were chatting earlier. You were shaking your head as that not in a bad way, not in a bad way, not in a bad way, but just so London has not become a subject of your work yet, or has it? Have you written about the town?
I think in my own way, yes.
Right.
I feel like I have an interesting relationship to the city of London, but to place in general, because I am probably the least physically grounded person I know in terms of place. Like when I'm not here for school, like this summer I lived in 15 different cities over 4 months doing theater and art-related things.
Interesting.
So yeah, so the way that place affects myself and my work is varied and sort of bizarre. But yeah, London is... I feel like I'm here not because I had any ties here or anything that drew me here, because I was here completely by chance. I came here to go to Western to be a lawyer. As you can see, that worked out. And as soon as I sort of got involved with the writing community and in English literature, I just sort of stayed and found my way in a sort of bizarre fashion.
So it's true what they say about bohemians and how they destroy good, solid lives. It's a bad thing, right?
Sure. Yeah, but I remember I was here when I was in second year. It was like, I think I was in first year. It was like St. Patrick's Day or something, and they had a talk in this very theater, and it was Jillian Kiley, who's I was an artistic director out east, and she said, she had a quote that sort of resonated with me, and it's, "To be universal, one must be local. To be true to the details of one's own being and upbringing in terms of place is a way to," because we think about Tennessee Williams and Streetcar Named Desire and how real everything in there feels, yet it's so specifically grounded in time and place. And I'm sorry, that's the first thing that came to my mind was Tennessee Williams, but especially because I work in theater, I feel like that's especially pertinent, like to be grounded in a specific place.
He's a big deal. He's a big deal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sort of.
Yeah.
A little bit. A
Yeah.
little bit of a big deal.
He's an up-and-comer. He'll be big one day.
Yeah, precisely that.
So that's interesting. So as a theater person touring in different places, you have a unique perspective on location. So, and how does that influence you? How does being untethered to a place influence how you approach place, say, or setting in your works?
I feel like that's a really project-to-project sort of basis. The play that I'm currently developing right now, entitled Patch Face, is very grounded in sort of like urban cityscape, inspired by not only the Dundas and Richmond area here, but my hometown of Hamilton, Ontario, which is, I always say, it's a city characterized by its grayness. Although, yes, there's a lot of green, but I've always seen it as a very gray place. But I don't know, I feel like the first show that I ever had that did well and that ended up winning a national playwriting competition, I think 2 years ago, was about traveling and about not being grounded to place. And I find now, looking back, that a lot of my work is sort of mobile in that sense as well, that it is ungrounded, yet at the same time very specific, and different details come from different places that I've been. So I feel like it's, my work ends up being sort of like a quilt or a scrapbook or patches of places that I've been. Yeah, it's a strange relationship to place, and I haven't, I think been as reflective as I wish I would have before this conversation and thought that through. But yeah, I just think it's interesting how place really affects different people creatively differently. And for someone like me who is not stagnant, the way that certain places and memories, you kind of feel like a fractured individual. You feel like your creative consciousness is really distributed among different places and regions. So I don't know.
That's interesting, yeah. That makes me think of something I heard. There's only two stories. There's guy comes to town and guy leaves town. And perhaps we can add to that, guy stuck in town, which is the perhaps maybe London, Ontario story. But but Aaron, you have a unique perspective too, as a publisher of the Thames Review. It's named after our river.
It is, yeah. I mean, I have a unique perspective. Is this working? Yes. Okay. I'm, like you said, guy stuck in town. I'm a bit of an accidental / reluctant resident of London, but it's almost 2 decades now. And I also have a unique perspective because, I named a journal after the river. There's a lot of reasons for that, but I also have this like terminal allergy to the way people conventionally think about things like the local, regional being in place. I figured you were going to ask this question. Sure. Because I've lived in London for 18 years now, I guess. It's shocking when I say that. So I thought, how am I going to answer this question? I actually thought of the beginning of one of my favorite books, which is Mario Vargas Llosa's Conversation in the Cathedral, where the main character, Skinny, is driving down a street in Peru, and he thinks to himself, he asks himself the question, at what particular time did Peru fuck itself up so badly? And for me, like you were asking earlier, but like, how do you make like London travel? I'm like, London isn't an isolated place. London's part of much bigger things. So from my perspective, it's a really good place to sit down and think about like, how did some things get so fucked up? Right. Because this town has, and I found some nice communities in this town, but it has some fairly nasty sides. I mean, we're in the process of building and exporting to Saudi Arabia. What is it, 700 LAVs? That are going to be used to kill lots of people. And that's a really significant portion of London's economy. And like, London is this small, tiny, isolated city in the southwestern Ontario that a lot of people drive by on the 401. And I mean, I teach at Western. A lot of the people who come here from elsewhere, students, and wouldn't be here if it weren't for some of the institutions. But it's also this place that's mixed up in and part of a lot of bigger issues that are sometimes difficult and ugly and really interesting to think about. So that's sort of how I see London from my perspective. In terms of from a publisher, I think that it's a really interesting community, and there's some surprising, I didn't say surprising, it sounds insulting, but there's some really genuine richness in terms of the writing that's done here, and some really interesting people doing some interesting stuff. And it's nice to see, like, if you look at that journal, because it's an online journal, it travels, right? So there's this really wonderful way in which you can connect people that you can see at local readings with, like, I think almost every issue now we've published a writer from Nigeria of one form or another next to someone that, like, you'll see down at a Poetry London reading. So there's this sort of fascinating way which it reaches out and connects people. That's probably not a very satisfying answer.
No, it is a really satisfying answer. I remember, I think Coach House Press put this one book. I think it was, I forget who it was, but it was called Property, and it was this guy. I think he was a professor at the university. He lived in London, Ontario, for 4 years, and he was so absolutely disgusted by his 4 years here that he wrote this damning Marxist critique of sort of middle-class London, and it was called Property, and it was basically just the total. Shitting on land ownership and the complacency of I think he Woodfield and Wortley, and just basically just hated it. But it's never included in any of the best of London reading lists and so on, and it's never celebrated on the CBC, and it's essentially forgotten. But it's the very kind of thing that you're talking about. Why do you think? Well, I mean, we could probably answer that question very quickly. But why do you think more of that kind of stuff doesn't come from this town? Why, I think we know the answer to this, obviously, but it would seem that London would be ripe for that kind of criticism because it's so clear and kind of asking for it in a way.
Yeah, I mean, it depends on what London you're talking about, but yeah, I'd say that significant portions of it are asking for it.
Right.
Why doesn't it come? Because it's hard, because it alienates people, because it's no fun to tell your next door neighbors they're jerks,
Right.
or at least they participate in systems that are really, in many ways, awful. It's uncomfortable for people to write about the places they come in really critical ways, right? The story on Alice Munro is that there are still people in Wingham who hold grudges against her.
Right.
Because, and I suppose now it's probably relatives of theirs, ancestors who were put in her books, but even someone like Leacock, who was writing about, whose Mariposa is based in a very specific town, and has this wonderful, gentle humor, was genuinely hated
Right.
by some of the people who he carried into those books and made the butt of his, in many ways, very gentle and kind and generous jokes.
Right. In all fairness, though, I grew up in a small town, 500 people, and I pissed Steve Wilson off in grade 5, and he still hates me, and he will never stop hating me. Those fires never go out, And also, my friend cut Alice Munro's lawn in Clinton, Ontario. And there are some people in Clinton, Ontario that just know her as that nice lady down the road who writes all those stories.
Yeah.
That she isn't never mind that she won the Nobel Prize, She's just, this Alice down the street, she's that nice lady that wrote all those stories, So there are some people that do like her there.
Oh yeah, no, I know.
Yeah.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
I wasn't damning everyone.
Okay, good. That's great.
I also
That's good.
grew up in a small town.
Okay.
I'm from Owen Sound.
I do.
So
Yes, I do.
I'm very familiar with that dynamic, and it's not that far from Wingham. And
It brings up an interesting point, and I'll put this to all three of you. One of the things that has been said about London, and we'll bring it back to us here in this room, and sort of, bring the magnification back to us instead of dealing with the extraordinary burden of, regionalism and, talking about the city. It's been said that because London is, such a quote-unquote conservative city, it has fostered, a real bohemian culture, and that it's because of that there is such a strong writers community, such a strong theater community, such a strong art community, because there is this sort of sameness, test market, North American, it's the most North American of cities to rally against and be different from. Do you think that's a fair statement? Do you guys feel that way? Do you guys feel that you're part of a larger art community in town?
Yeah, actually, and it's been a long time, because it would have been in the 1980s. I performed a James Rainey play in this auditorium, and I took classes from Rainey, so I'm feel I have this multi-generational experience of being regional London, Ontario, and it is a conservative city, but one thing about it being so staunchly conservative is that you have something so obvious to fight against that it gives you so much material, right? I mean, if you were in some place that was more interesting than London, you would have a hard time finding things to write about because it would just be too interesting. There isn't, I always say that London is a nice place to live, but I wouldn't want to visit. So there's that kind of thing about it. Anyway.
Yeah, on the subject of conservatism, I definitely wouldn't want to visit. That's great. On the subject of conservatism, I feel like not only is the conservative atmosphere in the city of London sort of inspiring to those of us who are rule breakers and who want to sort of rebel against conventional forms of writing or theater making or whatever it is, but I feel like there's a lot of conservatism in our world in general right now that transgresses just the city of London's borders. And I feel like that, while it's terrifying in a lot of ways, there is fuel there for a lot of resistance, and some of the best way to, I think, be political is through art and through the creation of new sort of forms and mediums of things like that. So I mean, in that way, conservatism is good, but.
So is it easy in London, Ontario to participate in larger issues, or is it harder? So, if you're not in Toronto, or if you're not in places where there are larger, say, more relevant communities fighting and more in touch with these issues or at the heart of these issues. Not saying that the communities in London, Ontario are not, but I'm saying that if one were in Washington, D.C., or Europe, or Britain, or Toronto even, if I may, is it harder to feel at the center of these things in London, Ontario? Or is it, I mean, I can speak for myself on this, and I know what my answer would be, but for you guys, is it easier or is it harder?
Well, I would say, speaking to Toronto, if you're not doing something very overtly political, you don't fit in Toronto. Like, I feel, especially speaking to the theater community, which is absolutely fantastic with that atmosphere there, but I think it's harder to experiment and to get that stuff off the ground in communities that are more conservative. But for me, for someone who is a little bit not a traditionalist, as you'll see by things I read a bit later on, I do like the conservatism because it gives me always something to try and challenge myself with or against. But I don't know, because I've never lived in Toronto and been a huge part of the scene there, I can't really speak that much to that. But I'm also from Hamilton, and I find the theater and arts community in Hamilton very, very similar to the one here, where it's like there's some experimental stuff going on, there's some way to sort of challenge status quo, but it's not, that's not the feel of the city artistically, I find.
How do you find it, Aaron? Like, London is isolated. Is it more difficult?
I mean, it is, but I live a large portion of the kind of literary life I have online, so I don't feel particularly isolated. I would also say that, if you want to connect up to some larger things, maybe it's more difficult, I suppose, but London has a really quite vibrant literary scene. It's kind of interesting. I have an interesting perspective on it because I teach in a department where a substantial number of the people I work with live in Toronto. And commute to London to teach. And they have that kind of I don't know, I'm going to be mean, but I'm going to do it anyway. They have that kind of bland coolness that one associates with certain kind of big city people. You can just sub someone in. And London community is incredibly supportive and frankly full of some interesting, and I mean this in the most complimentary way, kind of off-kilter people who are really genuinely wonderful. And we did a book launch a month and a half ago, and there were a lot of people there, and it was a venue that was filled. So I think
it was at DNA, and it was packed.
Yeah,
it was totally packed.
And that sort of thing is really kind of typical of what you find. There was a core group of sort of really interesting, very pleasant, very welcoming people who are really willing to come out and engage and sort of support each other, and that's really nice to see. And one of the most pleasant things about living in this community.
Yeah, that is interesting. There's this guy named Vinny, and he would always, at old poetry readings, in a larger city, I think this guy would be completely ostracized because of his absolute nerdiness and inappropriateness. But when a poet would read, and this would be, like Jason as a 14-year-old Leonard Cohen wannabe, or Michael Ondaatje, the prodigal son returning, Vinny would just bust out he was this big burly, kind of what's that Hawaiian singer, the guy who does Over the Rainbow, what's his name? Yeah, he's just this big guy, and he would just bust out his guitar and just start like enthusiastically playing along with like Michael Ondaatje, you know, like Michael Ondaatje's there like reading Billy the Kid, he's like the electricity and the horse's eye, you know, and like Vinny would just be like there, just like strumming. And in any other city, he would be completely ostracized because it's so deeply inappropriate. But in London, Ontario, you're just like, welcome to the party, man. Like, thanks for coming out. Thanks for supporting the community, you know? And there is something lovely about that. That's my story to say that I liked what you said.
Thanks. I haven't seen that yet, but if anyone wants to like,
He's dead. Like he's
Oh.
yeah, he's dead. He's gone. But
if
he's a
anyone
very
wants
nice
to
man.
carry on the torch, like,
Yeah, no, yeah, absolutely. Any of you. So this is a fascinating discussion, and obviously it's been half an hour. We could continue going. I mean, I have plenty of questions, but you guys also brought some stuff to read, so it's up to you. We could keep talking, or we could hear what you guys have to read. What do you think? You'd like to read? Okay, let's start with David. David, so
But I think I need to go to the podium because
these good folks have
I
brought
can't
some.
hold the microphone and turn pages at the same time. You probably can't walk and chew gum at the same time.
That's good.
This one? No, I don't think so. Oh, there's a green light on. Oh, is that? Okay. I'm going to read sort of at least the opening sequence of the new book, which is called Local Haunts. The first part of this sequence is basically based on a painting by London painter King Douglas Harrison. Port Franks, looking towards Kettle Point, a painting by Kim Douglas Harrison. Landscape verging on abstract, paint almost sculptural, laid on in layers. More atmospheric impression than geographic vision. The point itself limned between lake and sky. Only the merest hint of, is it green? Straight line almost curving across the middle of the canvas, more like memory than sight. Cloud as solid as rock, the boulders of its name. One glance and I know where I am. White sandy beaches I walk through adolescence. Random, silent, solitary walking, quietly, into my adult life. And the second section is actually a found poem. It's the language of Treaty Number 29. The Huron Tract, Number 29, 1827. 1. From the outlet of Burlington Bay on Lake Ontario, then on a course about north 84 degrees west to strike Lake Huron, north of the mouth of a large river emptying into the lake. Along the shore of Lake Huron, crossing the mouth of the river and following the several turnings and windings of the lake along the water's edge to the River St. Clair, until it intersects the northwest angle on the township of Sombra, at a hickory tree marked with a broad arrow on two sides, half a chain above the mouth of a small river, east along the northern boundary of the township to the northeast angle, along the eastern boundary line of the township of London, at the upper forks of the river La Tranche, or Thames, near the southwest angle of the township of Blandford, northerly and westerly up and along the eastern edge of the river against the stream until it intersects the third line on a south course from the outlet of Burlington Bay. 2. The mouth of the river Osable on Lake Huron, beginning at the northwest angle of the reserve at the water's edge, from where a large cedar post squared and marked to the east reserve, to the west 12th October 1826, And to the north, M. Burwell, deputy surveyor, has been planted well in the sand on the hillock. Then from the place of beginning on Lake Huron to the rear of the reserve, where stands a large elm tree, squared and marked on the north and east sides, reserve. On to the post of black ash squared, marked and witnessed, then on to a cedar post squared and marked on the west, reserve, and to the east, 1826. Then on to the shore of Lake Huron, where a large ironwood post, squared and marked, has been planted, then northerly and easterly along the shore of Lake Huron, following the several turnings and windings around Kettle Point to the place of beginning. Also all that certain other parcel of land, situated on the river St. Clair below the rapids, beginning at the southwest angle of the water's edge of the river St. Clair, where a large red elm post has been planted in the side of the bank. Squared and marked to the north reserve, to the east, 1826, and a broad arrow standing 58 links from the water's edge. Then on to the north, then on to the southeast angle of the reserve, at which is planted a large white oak post, squared and marked reserve. Then where a large black ash corner post has been planted, squared and marked on the south reserve, on the north and east, 1826, with witnesses marked all around. Then to a large white oak post, squared and marked on the east and south reserve, on the north, 1826, with a broad arrow, and on the west, M. Burwell, deputy surveyor, 30th October, 1826, and then reserve. The marking, the planting of posts, encircling the building of a fence, a wall of cedar, elm, ash, ironwood, red elm, white oak, black ash, hickory, the surveyor's chains marking their links on the land, surveying, seeing, the act of closing off, constricting, limiting space to the east, to the west, to the north, and the south, along the edge of Lake Huron, marking out the confines, the restrictions, the treaties, limitations, consigning space to hold, to occupy, reserve. M. Burwell, deputy surveyor, 30th October, 1826, architect of enclosure, purveyor of exclusion, definer of confines, restrictor of races. Thank you.
Wow. Ooh, I'm sweating. How's everyone doing? Pretty good. I hope so. So my first poem is going to be called "I Love You More Than Anybody Else in the History of the World Has Ever." I've been holding on to that joke for a couple minutes, guys. So I'm going to be a bit of a nonconformist here. I'm going to be reading the second scene from my play currently in development, which is called Patchface, which is essentially about a middle-aged couple. The wife unexplainably loses her sight one day, and the husband starts falling in love with this faceless telemarketer who calls on the same day. It's about desire and the space between communicating parties. It's a lot of fun. And the first scene, I'm going to be reading both parts, man and woman. Now, I'm going to be using my hands to gesture who's talking. This is going to be man, this is going to be woman. But it doesn't matter much because the voices are supposed to sort of all blend into one. So here we go. This is the second scene from Patchface. Imagine there is a city, and in this city there lives a man and a woman. It's nighttime, midnight, pitch black, except for the moon. The moon is red tonight, red like blood hanging over the parking lots, and the wind howls. When the sun comes up in the morning, you can still see its stencil, like the outline of a cloud or the eye of God, but pink. It could be anything really, no matter, but the moon eye is significant. Yes, because on this day that the moon appeared red in the sky and left its shadow for digestion, that it happened. But wait, what? We are too far forward, we have to go back. Yes, we're going back. There is a city. And in this city there lives a man and a woman, and many other people. For here is the bearded man that wails for nickels outside the deadening sushi joint, and this is the grid which takes us from King to Main, back down to Queen, and out to Highbury, Line, and Square. I grew up on a farm outside of Caledonia. Green is in my blood. I am a stranger to the city, but he knows it intimately. Every flashing light and rubber wheel, each drill churning flesh to steel, each crate and corner, a symphony. For there are the cranes hovering high above the progressive rubble, desire unhinged, and here is my body, a cyclone of shapes, and here I am caught up in the debris. This is how things are in our city. Green is in my blood, and here is the three-legged dog. Here is the bus stop waning blue. Here is the crack of life, and here we are. Her face, his touch, her love, her eyes. His hands on hers, on her, all over her, until this day, the specific moon-eyed day that she loses her sight. Completely, without warning, in the middle of the kitchen, so we take her to the doctor. He drives. They do all the required tests. Her blood work is fine. Her tests show nothing. There is no doubt that she is in perfect health, except that she is now blind. And the doctor said, apply a cold compress. The doctor said, get lots of rest, drink lots of water. The doctor said, wait, for here is the ambulance rushing north, rushing east. It could just be temporary in every step. It could be a fluke, out in front, behind, in front. But of her blindness, there is no doubt. They leave the doctors without explanation or diagnosis. They go home. Moments pass. They listen to the rain. He says, so, are you what? He doesn't know what to say. I don't understand. I mean, do you what? You want something to eat? No. He doesn't know what to, I know. How am I supposed to just stay with me? Okay. Where are you? Right here. Touch me. Woman holds out her hand. Man touches her. An intimate moment. He takes her to bed. They fuck like rabbits. He's careful, but she knows his hands and shapes and exactly where she fits, her place with him, in him, around him, and then they sleep after some time. And in the morning, he leaves early for work and she stays in bed and feels she'd open the windows, but what's the point? And it was that very day, the day after she lost her sight, that the phone rang. Bring! Now, that's not to say in a day and age like this that the phone's never rang before. Of course, the phone has rang many a time, but not like this, and never again. Okay, I'm gonna play a song now. The really great thing about London that I find is that there are so many parks and lovely green spaces. And I'm going to sing a song that I wrote. Sorry, guys. I'm going to sing a bit of a song that I wrote that has to do with some of these things. I feel like I have a spiritual relationship to the river, and I think it made its way into this song. This song is called I'm a Mountain. It's going to be on my album, which is coming out next year, early in February. Hopefully, it's going to be called Sharp Teeth. Oh, I haven't announced that yet. Well, you know now. The song is called I Am a Mountain. And, okay, here we go. She said I am a mountain, so mountain I will be. My feet are pools of magma, my head's the tallest peak. And if my heart gets broken, lots of snow will cover me. But she said I am a mountain, so mountain I will be. She said I am a mountain, and my arms are strong as hell, but my mind is chasing tail, trying hard to find itself. And if there is an avalanche, I'll take down every tree. But she said I am a mountain, so mountain I will be. Out in the cold, oh, wind come blow. And he let me go, oh, I should have known. But she said I am a river, flowing stronger than before. I told her that I missed him, but I miss myself more. And God, I will be damned if love and loss are all I see. But I know I am a river, let the water swallow me. Out in the cold, oh, letting me go. Oh, out in the snow, oh, here I go. Said I am a mountain, and I said I am the sea. I'll sing it every windstorm, I'll rock myself to sleep. And I knew he was my curse and I tried hard to set it free. But she said I am a mountain, and I said I am the sea. No, said I am a mountain, so mountain I will be. My cliffs are wild and rocky, but my mind is toxin free. No, time can really hurt, but it'll never ruin me. But she said I am a mountain, and I said I am the sea. No, no. Yes, I said I am a mountain, standing tall and standing free. No. Yes, I said I am a mountain. You can never conquer me. Ooh, you can never conquer me. Ooh, my hands are frozen, guys. No, I can't strum. Thank you.
So we're okay for time, but I don't want to take too much of it. So I'm just going to read a short scene from the novella that I have coming out. And so two things go on in it. One, a bunch of people go to this northern, very exclusive hunting and lodge and retreat where they essentially kill a series of animals over a course of days and learn how to butcher them and cook them, etc. It goes predictably as bad as you would think. But at the same time, they pause when they have moments during this retreat and think about their past and what brought them there, why they're there, and how those pasts fit into where they're there. So I thought I'd read just a really short piece of one of those characters thinking about that. I thought I'd read it because while we're talking about London, this is not London, but this young woman is from Mitchell, Ontario, which is just up the road. I think the only thing you need to know about her, because it's referenced, but she's a young woman from Mitchell, Ontario who has lived the Mitchell dream. She's moved to Toronto. She's married an NHL player. And is now unhappily married to him, more or less. So her name is Mandy Dushku. And the person who's referenced in this at the beginning is her husband. I can see Tad in profile. His expression never changes, and at times like this, it is comforting. I was born in Mitchell, Ontario. Everyone leaves Mitchell, but no one leaves Mitchell behind, the way Tad's face never changes. I remember my parents' bungalow on the west side of town, half white brick, half siding. The bridge I crossed every day. North of it, the dam from which the water ran wide and shallow or narrow and weak. The banks were shelves of mud. The river shrank to pools and silt flats in the summer. The town sign said, the home of Howie Moran's. Now I recognize most people, and the ones that I didn't recognize reminded me of someone I did, the way this room reminds me of rooms I've seen on TV. I was always pretty, but I was never the prettiest, and I had to work at it. In grade 7, Bryce Skinner asked me to ask my best friend Carolyn if she liked him. I spent high school going on double dates. I talked awkwardly with the awkward friends of boyfriends. I threw parties for other people. I was the head of the Mitchell District High School prom committee. I got A's, but I tried for them and they were A minuses. I never had the effortless intelligence of Jonathan Caldwell. He wore beige running shoes and brown slacks, and he didn't care that he wasn't cool. He won math competitions. He only paid attention in science class, and he went to Waterloo for computer engineering. Everyone understood that Stephen Wood was better than his 74% average because he slouched to the back of classes, smoked at lunch, and read Arthur C. Clarke. Every B I got was who I was. Stephen did a 5-year bachelor's degree at Carleton. He didn't get into teachers' college and taught English in China before coming back to Mitchell. I saw him 2 summers ago in front of the Dollar Haven on Main Street. He still smoked, and he talked quickly under the green sign as if he expected me to interrupt him. He was planning to open a used bookstore and cafe in a restored farmhouse on Highway 23. He wanted to focus on fantasy and science fiction. What I felt when I left him standing there on the sidewalk was not pride, but relief. After prom, I let Glenn Burns fuck me in the back of his pickup truck. He was Spencer Abbott's best friend. I remember his round face, its pouches of flesh, his body already heavy with a beer gut. He played hockey and lacrosse. A write-up in the Mitchell Advocate had called him a standout two-sport athlete, and he'd been to a London Knights training camp. The truck was parked in the field behind Spencer's father's barn. I could see the bonfire against the sky. I didn't tell him it was my first time, but he knew, because in Mitchell, everyone knew everything about each other. I waited tables at Sharon's coffee shop and dining room on Main Street, after school, and full-time that summer. Ron, Sharon's son, told me I was the sunniest waitress he'd ever had. The old farmers wore shirts from the feed mill and pinched my thighs when I turned around. I went to Ryerson for interior design, but not on a scholarship, and no one noticed when I left.
So thank you so much, everybody, for coming. So that's it for today. Thank you for getting up so early. Come to the 10 o'clock thing. It was the first of the day. Thank you so much to our 3 amazing interviewees and readers. With apologies to the next event, not giving enough time for turnaround, but let me say welcome to the next event, everyone who snuck in. It's going to be a good one. And thank you so much for WordFest. This was fantastic. And have a great day, folks.